Hi friends, Denise from Salvaged Inspirations, and thank you for joining me today. Today I have a gorgeous English Ivy dresser makeover, and today's video is sponsored by Dixie Belle. So just a heads up, I have a giveaway alert for you at the end. I fixed up this dresser. I'm also sharing how I took off these old rusted castor wheels off this dresser. I'm also sharing how I fixed dog bites or dog scratches. I don't even know what they are actually. Bites or scratches. I can't believe that I missed it when I actually bought this dresser. Just wait until you see what the whole side looks like. Anyways, just let me get set up and I'll be right back. Let's start. Here's the fun part. Here's the salvaged 3-drawer dresser I started with. I found it selling at my local restore. I paid $70 for this dresser, thinking it was in pretty good shape. But just wait until you see the doozy damage that I missed, and I still can't believe I didn't see it. Once I got it back home into my studio, I took a really good look at it. And as you can see, there were some scratches on the top. There were a couple of holes on the back where a mirror had been placed. There were a few dings along the side, but check out the bottom of this dresser. What? How did I miss all this? I'm assuming it's dog scratches or dog bites. So, time to get to work to make this girl pretty. I started by using my heat gun and removing the price tag. Then it was time to remove the drawers and give them a good look over as well. This dresser is fairly old, and you can tell by the old school hardware. I took a pair of needle nose pliers and twisted off the old square nuts. This hardware is old and has been in there for a while, so I just used the back of my screwdriver and give the screws a big bang just to push them out. To remove the front plate of these knobs or handles, I used my anvil pry bar. These are super handy, these pry bars, these smaller pry bars for furniture repairs. And I just pried that finishing nail out, making sure not to damage the front of the drawer while doing so. Once I had the hardware off, I started collecting it in a plastic container just to make sure that all the hardware is all together. I wasn't sure if I was going to reuse it on this piece or not. I didn't end up using it on this piece, but I always keep all my hardware because you never know when they're going to come in handy for future makeovers. I continued with each drawer, taking them out, inspecting them, removing the hardware, and putting it aside in the container. After all the hardware was removed, it was time to give this piece a really good cleaning. I use White Lightning. It's a TSP substitute that I mix in a spray bottle. Then I can just spray the inside and the out of these drawers and give them a really good wipe down with a large sponge. When I'm cleaning these older drawers, I make sure to do the backs and the bottoms really well. You never know what's hanging out at the bottom of these drawers. Once I had all the drawers nice and clean, it was time to move on to the body of the dresser. And again, I just sprayed it with my TSP substitute and gave everything a really good wipe down, including this chewed up bottom. I don't know why it looks so black because I cleaned it and cleaned it and cleaned it. And honestly, it didn't look much different than when I started, but I really got in there. And a quick tip for scratches or deep grooves where you notice that the dirt is not coming out properly, I tend to grab a brush. I picked my scrubby brush up from the dollar store, but they do sell them online, very, very inexpensive. And they are great when you are trying to get grooves, like I said, out of scratches and out of furniture grooves, such as the lip on this dresser top. So once the dresser was all clean and dried, it was time to start repairing this dresser. I took out my all-purpose Bondo putty. I prefer to use all-purpose rather than the wood fill Bondo. I find that it works exactly the same. However, it is a little less expensive than the wood Bondo putty. And I find there is no difference in, once you mix it up in the repairs, it makes no difference at all. So I just take a golf ball size of Bondo and then I add in the hardener. Once a little hardener is added, probably about a pea-sized amount of hardener, I just mix it up really well. In this case, the hardener is blue, so I just want to make sure that the Bondo all gets tinted with the blue hue. And once it's ready to go, I started filling in the holes that the old mirror was attached to. And then I moved on to the drawers and started filling in all the hardware holes there and just working around the dresser, filling in the scratches, etc. With the Bondo, I only mix a small amount at a time because Bondo dries super fast and super hard, which is fabulous. I mean, this is the reason why I love working with it. But you don't want to mix up a large batch because it will go hard on you before you actually fill in all the hardware holes. So I just mix it up in smaller batches. It's super easy and fast to do. This ensures that the Bondo stays nice and creamy and easy to work with. A little quick tip when I'm filling hardware holes or any sort of holes with the Bondo, I don't worry about an excess going beneath the dresser. In this case, it was the mirror holes and it kind of squeezed out in the hole underneath. I just go in and I use my putty knife and I just scrape it right off. Or once it's dry, you can just take a putty knife and a hammer and it'll just knock right off. So before I tackled the heavy duty repair on the side with the dog damage, I took off the castor wheels. I was actually going to leave them on. One was missing. I was going to use a spare that I had from another project, but then I thought, nope, I want a more modern look for this piece. So I'm taking the 3 castor wheels totally off. To do this, I took a larger pry bar and a hammer, and they usually just you can whack them right off pretty easily unless they're really rusted. If they're really rusted in there, it might take, a little extra effort with that pry bar and a few more whacks with your hammer, but they will come out. The one castor wheel was so rusted on there, the little faceplate did not want to be pried off at all. So I ended up taking a wire, and I also tried using my screwdriver to really get in there and pry that away from the bottom of the leg. It did take some maneuvering. In fact, I ended up chipping my screwdriver, so it's not usable. But it did end up being pried away finally. And once I had it pried away enough to get that pry bar in behind, it whacked off pretty easily as well. Now I had all 4 castor wheels off and it was ready for the dog repair. So to repair all these scratches, I used Bondo, and I found a board that fit on the bottom of the dresser, which created a frame, because I wanted the Bondo to be able to sit against something and to get a totally smooth edge at the end. So I took my furniture clamp, clamped the board onto the dresser, and started mixing up my Bondo. Once all my Bondo was totally mixed in together, I started filling in all these scratches with a fair amount. As you can see, it's kind of like icing a cake. I just kept on applying it and then smoothing it out and then applying more and smoothing it out. It doesn't really matter that it's getting on the board because I would take away the board before the Bondo dries 100%. That's a little tip here. When you're filling in any sort of missing area from a piece of furniture, you create, like I said, a frame using any sort of board, cardboard, paint stick, etc. And then when the Bondo is partially dry, you can pull it away so it doesn't stick on, which I'll show you in a moment. I also wanted to mention that large repairs like this, you do want to overfill and you want to apply more Bondo, feather it out from the repair. So you'll notice that I'm applying it much farther higher, or I should say much higher than these dog scratches or bites are. And that's just because you're going to smooth it all down to create a smooth surface, but you want an excess. It's not going to look perfect the first coat. As you can see here, it looks pretty rough actually, but don't worry, once that smooths down and you end up applying a second coat on, it's going to be picture perfect. Well, my Bondo was drying on the dog scratches and the dog repair. I went ahead and brought my drawers into my sanding room and started sanding the Bondo off the front of the drawers. This also allows me to give these drawers a nice scuff sanding so the primer clings to it. After about, I'd say 5 to 7 minutes of the Bondo repair drying, I went and I removed the board off the bottom. Again, I don't wait until the Bondo is 100% dry. As you'll see, the board comes off, no problem. And here you can see that there's a straight edge for me to sand on now. And that's exactly what I did. I brought the body of this dresser into my sanding room and started scuff sanding the entire top to get out the scratches that were there and also sand down the Bondo in the back. Then I flipped the dresser over onto its side and started sanding my Bondo repair. As I mentioned, Bondo is super durable and dries super hard, so be patient when you're sanding with it. A lower grit is usually what I like to use, like an 80 or 120 for my first once over for these Bondo repairs. But you still have to be patient and let your sander, orbital sander, do the work for you. Once all the Bondo was sanded, it was time to flip it over on its other side and give the rest of the dresser a scuff sanding on the front and on the side. For the areas that are a little difficult to get into with my orbital sander, I just sand by hand. And here's what the Bondo repair looks like on the first round. You'll see there's a few divots and it's not 100% smooth, but the second coat takes care of that, no problem. I just repeat the exact same process I did the first time around, mixing up the Bondo with the hardener. Obviously, I don't need as much this time because I'm just filling in a few little areas. With the extra Bondo, I went in and I did some filling in the top of the scratches that the sander did not get out. And then back to the sanding room for more sanding. Woo! Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Back into the paint room, I started getting my primer ready, and for this dresser, I used BIN shellac base primer. I like applying this primer with a high density foam roller. It is amazing to block any sort of bleed through that comes through, and it will block all these Bondo repairs as well. Here I am applying it on the Bondo Repair that I did, and you'll notice there's a tiny little area that needs filling on the right-hand side. And this is very, very visible once you prime. So if you miss anything before you do your primer, once you add a primer onto it, everything will be visible. That was a super easy fix. You just go in with a little bit of wood fill, let that dry, and then your second coat of primer fixes that right up. Now for the fun part. I used this Dixie Belle chalk mineral paint in English Ivy, which is part of their new cottage collection. I'm a huge fan of green furniture. I know green is one of those colors. Maybe you love it or not so much. I'd like to hear your comments down in the comments section below. But this English Ivy, it's a beautiful earthy forest green with some gray undertones. Just beautiful. I applied 2 coats of this English Ivy using my 2-inch Dixie Belle flat brush. When I was finished painting, to get all this pigmented paint out of my paintbrush, I put it under, I'd say, very lukewarm water, I suppose. And I've been using my scrubby my scrubby soap to clean the paint out. And this soap is awesome. I have to say, I've been loving it to clean my brushes. There's a brush on, like a spongy brush on one side and then the soap on the other. But the sponge kind of goes all the way through, and it's just phenomenal to keep your brushes really nice and clean and in really good shape. And it smells beautiful as well. I gave this dresser a really light, quick sanding after the first coat, and then I went ahead and applied my second coat. Okay, now for another fun part. This was exciting for me. I had purchased an airbrush and compressor last week, and I was going to use it on my wreath makeover. However, I didn't need to. I love the color, but I was looking forward to using it on something. So I decided to stencil this dresser, and I got out my gold metallic paint. I added it into my airbrush, and I airbrushed this Enchanted Garden stencil onto the front of the drawers. And did I ever have fun? This was the very first time I've used an airbrush. I've always wanted to try. So I just positioned the stencil exactly where I wanted it. These are smaller stencils, so I kind of had to piece it together. But I positioned it where I wanted it, and then I used painter's tape to keep the stencil in place. And I went ahead and I played with this airbrush, and I have to say the stencil turned out beautifully. I was quite surprised that when you fill, I had to dilute the metallic paint with water a little bit, and then you fill it in the air gun cup. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly how to airbrush because, as I mentioned, this was my first time, so I'm not going to give a whole lot of advice. But I was very impressed with how little paint goes such a long way because it sprays it on so nice and thin, right? So for the stencil, it's perfect because it dries super fast. It's a thin coat. I also had my heat gun on hand, so I would dry the thin coat super fast, like within 30 seconds. And then I could add on another coat if I wanted it darker within the leaves. I just kept on repeating this process by moving the stencil over and matching it up, then doing the airbrushing, holding it down with the painter's tape where need be, giving it a quick dry with the heat gun, and check this out. Doesn't it look great? Once I had my Enchanted Garden stenciled on these drawers, I let everything dry overnight, and I came back the next morning to top coat with gator hide. I added 3 coats of gator hide, and check out how nice this repaired side looks now. I had a few comments on the SI blog about not posting a finished picture of the repaired side. I don't know why I didn't photograph it. That was silly, but I hope you guys can see here how great it looks. For the finishing touch, after all the top coat was nice and dry, I put on these brushed brass little knobs that I picked up from Amazon. I thought they were a perfect match for the gold metallic paint. I measured twice, drilled once, and I actually used my hardware template that I also bought off Amazon. And this is super cheap. I think I paid $6 or $7 for it, and it's really come in handy for measuring up where the hardware holes go. I continued to drill the holes for all 3 drawers and install the new hardware, and we are finished. So I can't wait to show you the before and after. Here's the before. And here's the after. Oh, I'm just so tickled pink with this airbrush stencil. I can't tell you how lovely I think it looks on this English Ivy color. And I cannot wait to hear what you think. So I hope you enjoyed this English Ivy dresser makeover as much as I do. I love the way it turned out, and I can't wait to hear what you think of it down in the comments below. So now for a fun giveaway so you can try some Dixie Belle products. All you have to do is hop on over to salvagedinspirations.com. I'll leave the link in the description show more box below. Follow the instructions on how to enter. And if you want additional entries, You just have to visit my 4 talented, super talented, fabulous blogger buddies, and that link will be over at salvagedinspirations.com as well. If you want to see the video tutorial for a couple of these makeovers, head on over to Cindy at Reinvented Delaware and Natalie at A Ray of Sunlight. And I'll include those links down below. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. And until next time, have a fabulous week. Bye, guys.